It's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to this edition of Q&A with the Coach. We have a question today from, what is this guy's name? Hero, who says, now that the average man is basically a heavyweight... What? Now that the average man is basically a heavyweight, about 200 pounds. Neither of those things are true. The average man is Han Chinese guy who weighs about 135 pounds. He's about 5'7" or 5'8", owns a pair of khaki trousers, speaks Mandarin and maybe his hometown local language. Works. Anyway, let's not get bogged down into details about the average man. A heavyweight in the sport of mixed martial arts is an upper weight limit of 265 pounds. So we're talking about guys who are generally cutting from an excess of 265 pounds to get down to 265. In the sport of boxing, depending on which boxing organization we go into and what era of boxing we're looking at, that can change quite a bit. For example, if you look at the smallest heavyweight boxer of all time, what was his name? That Canadian dude. The only Canadian boxing heavyweight champion ever. The dude was, man, I'm blanking on his name, but he has a really cool backstory, and I started writing a script for a documentary about this guy, so I really should remember his name. Anyway, he weighed 167 pounds when he won the heavyweight title. 167 pounds. He lost a title fight against Jack Johnson. What was this dude's name? Tommy Burns? Was it Tommy Burns? Some boxing historian. Let me know, look that up, because I don't have time to look it up right now. Anyway, so in boxing, heavyweight is variable, depending on who we're talking about here. Anyway, has the average man gotten stronger or weaker in a fight over time? Who's got better odds? Today's out-of-shape 200-pound, low-cardio, low-muscle, unhealthy, untrained guy, or 1950s, 147 pounds, low-cardio, low-muscle, unhealthy, untrained guys. This is funny, man. I weigh about 220 pounds myself, and I competed in 4 different weight classes. Featherweight. Did featherweight twice, once in an MMA fight, once in a kickboxing match. Lightweight. I did a lot of lightweight fights. Welterweight. I did a lot of welterweight fights. And middleweight. I did one middleweight fight. But I walk around about 220 pounds these days. So that's still not heavyweight. When I go to the UFC Performance Institute to spar with the fighters over there, they put me with the welterweights usually. So, yeah, 220-pound guys cutting down to 170. So, weight classes, man, it's a whole illusion that blows people's minds when they see how big fighters are in real life. They're like, I thought you were just 145 pounds and you're a 220-pound giant. Anyway, that's not what your question's about. So basically, the average person, especially in a country like the United States, where there's an obesity epidemic and we've got like 60% of adults in America are overweight, and I don't know what percentage of those are considered obese and morbidly obese, etc., but it's a lot more than it used to be, like a lot, specifically because of increased sugar consumption in America and worldwide. Man, when I first came here to China, it was very rare for Chinese people to eat sugar. In fact, when my Chinese friends would eat something sweet, like some American type of sweet dessert, they'd pucker up and say, oh, that's too sweet, like it was burning their throats, like they couldn't handle it. And over 15 years later, the culture has changed quite a bit here in China, and it's not as extreme as it is in America, but sweet things, sugar, processed sugar, especially sugary drinks, are much, much more common than they used to be. And so people got fatter here. Not to the same extent as in America, but man, so much fatter than they used to be. Man, it used to be such a rare thing to see a fat Chinese person, like fat at all. Everybody was skinny, trim, slim. But yeah, you can see some people on the streets of Shanghai with some fluff around the midsection these days. It's different. It's a whole different thing. A lot of things have changed, man. When I first got here, like, it was very rare to see Chinese women wear makeup. And now it's very, very common. And that's just 15 years, man. So you're asking me about the 1950s. I was born in the 1970s, so I didn't experience the 1950s. I know people who lived in that era. I knew people who lived in the 1800s when I was growing up. Man, I grew up in a small rural farming town in the United States, in Idaho, southwestern Idaho. And I grew up around a lot of really physically tough guys, farmers, people who did manual labor every day, farmers and cattle ranchers. And these dudes were ridiculously strong to a degree that I can't really compare it to strength athletes. Differently strong, like wiry, strong. Like the type of strength that you won't get in a gym. You won't get it deadlifting and squatting. You won't get it doing curls and overhead presses and pull-ups. Farm strength it's a different type of thing. And it was different then than it is now, because now there's a lot more automated process in American agriculture than there was back then, especially in a small town. Nutrition has changed. So if I read a study once, and this is quite interesting, comparing the nutritional content of canned food from the 1950s with modern canned food, and it's substantial. Like 1950s food had a substantially larger amount of nutritional content compared to its modern equivalent. And that's largely due to soil depletion. Soil depletion is a big problem, and it's a problem that's going to affect our world in some very noticeable ways in the next 20 years, unfortunately. So, next generation, oh boy, you're in for some trouble as far as food and famine go, so be prepared. Be prepared, friends. So has the average man gotten stronger or weaker in a fight over time? If you go from a small town like I grew up in, where there were these gritty, tough farmers, and then go to a city and meet some city slickers who've never done an honest day's work in their life, you're going to notice a massive difference in athleticism and strength and grit and endurance and durability and all the good stuff that makes you a good fighter. It's massive. There's no comparison. And this is from the same era. You could do this right now. Go to a big city, meet 100 people. Go to a small town, meet 100 people, if you can find 100 people there. My dad grew up in a town with like 50 people in it. So, and you will notice massive differences in the physical abilities of those humans within the same time frame. So, what would be the difference of, say, some dude who grew up in my hometown as a farmer doing manual labor all day in the 1950s, and some dude doing the same thing today? Probably not a whole lot. Except maybe that dude who grew up in the olden days, fought in a couple of world wars or something. I knew this old fellow who actually did fight in World War I and World War II, and he was a farmer, and he was tough as nails, and oh boy, man, they don't make him like that anymore. But there's a second part of this question I didn't really address. Who's got better odds, today's out-of-shape, 200-pound, low-cardio, low-muscle, unhealthy, untrained guys, or a 147 pound guy from the 1950s, low cardio, low muscle. So basically, we got a skinny little nerd from the 1950s and a fat, out of shape nerd from the 2000s. In that case, dude, it's a matter of who's going to weigh more. If neither of them know how to fight, the heavier guy is much more likely to squash the little guy. If all other things are equal, it's kind of a silly question. But we entertained it. Did we not? Are you not entertained? If you have questions, serious questions, leave them in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and train.